Imagine waking up one day, checking your bank account, and realizing you're a millionaire. No lottery ticket, no famous last name. Just years of quiet decisions that suddenly add up to a number you never thought would belong to you. Welcome to Hidden Finance, where we uncover the stories the rich rarely tell, the patterns most people never see, and the financial secrets hiding in plain sight. In this episode, we're traveling through time to expose how ordinary workers, teachers, shopkeepers, and immigrants became millionaires in the past, and how, with the tools you have today, you might do it faster than any generation before you. If you understand the game, for most of human history, the idea of an ordinary millionaire was almost impossible. Wealth belonged to kings, landowners, and a tiny elite. If you were born a farmer, a craftsman, a servant, your financial future was written before you took your first steps. But then something happened that began to crack this ancient script: the rise of markets, money, and a new system called capitalism. It created opportunities. And for the first time, ordinary people could slowly, quietly, buy a piece of the wealth machine. The word millionaire itself only became common in the 19th century, when industrialization exploded across Europe and the United States. Railways, steel, coal, and factories minted fortunes for tycoons. But underneath those giants, new paths opened for smaller players. A shopkeeper who owned their building, a clerk who bought shares in the company they worked for, a farmer who expanded his land as cities grew. They weren't born rich. They just found themselves holding assets that suddenly became very valuable in a rapidly changing world. Even then, millionaires were rare, but the rules of the game were being rewritten. The biggest change came in the 20th century, after two world wars reshaped the global economy. In places like the United States, Western Europe, and later parts of Asia, something new appeared: the middle class. Wages rose, home ownership became possible, and for the first time, everyday workers gained access to the stock market through pensions and retirement plans. You didn't need to own a factory, you just needed to own tiny pieces of many factories through stocks and funds that quietly compounded for decades. Picture a young American soldier returning from World War II. In 1946, under the GI Bill, he gets help to buy a modest house in a quiet suburb. He starts a normal job, maybe at a car plant or a telephone company. Every month, a small chunk of his paycheck goes into a pension fund that buys stocks and bonds. He doesn't think of himself as an investor. He just shows up to work, mows the lawn on weekends, and pays his mortgage. But as the decades tick by, inflation pushes up salaries, housing prices slowly climb, and the stock market grows alongside the post-war boom. By the time he retires in the 1980s or 1990s, something almost unbelievable has happened. His house, bought for a few $1,000s, is now worth hundreds of thousands. His retirement account, powered by dividends and compounding, has grown into 6 or 7 figures. He never started a business. He never took a finance course. He just lived through an era of growth and owned assets that rose with it. This was the first great age of the accidental millionaire, but some ordinary people did more than accidentally become rich. They quietly played the game with extraordinary patience. Take Grace Groner, a secretary who worked for the same company, Abbott Laboratories, for decades. In 1935, she bought 3 shares of the company's stock and never sold. She lived simply, wore second-hand clothes, and avoided debt. When she died in 2010, her estate was worth over $7 million. The money didn't come from genius or timing, it came from time itself. And the relentless power of reinvested dividends over 75 years. Or consider Ronald Read, a janitor and gas station attendant from Vermont. He fixed cars, swept floors, and drove an old used car. But he had one unusual habit: he spent less than he earned, and quietly bought shares of solid, dividend-paying companies, year after year. When he passed away in 2014, he left behind a fortune of roughly $8 million, mostly in stocks. The world called it shocking, but beneath the shock was a simple formula: frugality, consistency, and ownership of productive assets over decades. These stories might sound like rare miracles, but they reveal a pattern. Ordinary millionaires of the past tended to follow a similar path. They earned an income, lived below their means, owned assets that grew with the economy, especially stocks and real estate, and let time do the heavy lifting. Many were helped by powerful economic winds at their back, rising housing markets, strong growth after the war, and, in some countries, generous pensions. They weren't always the smartest people in the room, but they were patient in a world addicted to quick wins. Outside the West, similar stories played out as globalization spread. In Japan, small factory owners and workers who bought company shares in the 1960s watched them soar during the country's economic miracle. In South Korea and Taiwan, families who scrimped, saved, and pushed their children into education saw their human capital, their skills, turn into businesses, tech careers, and rising incomes. In China, ordinary farmers who moved to booming cities, started street stalls, and later small factories rode a wave of economic liberalization that transformed peasants into millionaires within a single generation. The details differed, but the ingredients were familiar: ownership, opportunity, and time. Then, in the late 20th century, a new force arrived that would speed everything up: technology. The personal computer, then the internet, then mobile phones, and finally smartphones. Each step compressed time and distance. You no longer needed to live near Wall Street to buy a stock, or in a major city to start a global business. Earning power and opportunity began shifting from physical labor and location to knowledge, creativity, and code. Ordinary people now had access to extraordinary leverage. In the 1990s, some early employees at companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon became millionaires not because they started those companies, but because they received stock options. They were engineers, marketers, even office administrators. But they owned a slice of an explosive new industry. In the 2000s and 2010s, YouTubers, app developers, and online store owners turned laptops into global storefronts. A teenager could design a product, manufacture it cheaply overseas, advertise on social media, and ship worldwide, something nearly impossible just decades earlier. The time between idea and income was shrinking, but reality stayed complicated. While some people got rich faster, many others watched the ladder pull farther away. Housing prices in major cities exploded, wages stagnated for parts of the workforce, and easy credit trapped millions in debt. The same technologies that created millionaires also amplified inequality and speculation. Day trading, meme stocks, crypto booms and busts, fortunes were made and lost overnight. The old formula of work, save, buy a house, invest a bit, retire rich suddenly felt less reliable or out of reach in many parts of the world. So what does all of this mean for you right now? To answer that, we have to strip away the noise and focus on the signal. Across centuries, countries, and systems, three levers show up again and again in the stories of ordinary millionaires: income, ownership, and time. First, they increase their earning power through skills, careers, or businesses. Second, they convert a portion of that income into assets, stocks, real estate, or stakes in companies. Third, they let compounding and time grow those assets, resisting the temptation to constantly start over. Everything else are details and distractions. Here's the difference between their world and yours. In the past, it often took 40 or 50 years to quietly grow into a millionaire, if you were lucky enough to be in the right country at the right time. Access to markets was limited, information flowed slowly, and learning about money was difficult. Today, you can open a brokerage account from your phone in minutes. You can buy fractional shares of global companies with spare change. You can learn investing, coding, marketing, or entrepreneurship for free from your bedroom. The tools to accelerate the journey are more powerful than ever, but so are the traps that can derail it. If you want to become a millionaire faster than previous generations, you're not just playing the old game. You're playing a faster, more volatile version that means two things. First, you have more upside if you build rare, valuable skills that can earn you much more than a typical salary. Think software development, data, design, sales, specialized trades, or niche expertise. Second, you need a clear strategy to turn higher income into lasting wealth, instead of letting lifestyle creep and debt swallow it. Earning a lot is not the same as becoming rich. Ownership is the bridge between the two. Look again at the janitor, the secretary, the post-war worker. None of them became millionaires by hoarding cash. They became millionaires by owning pieces of productive assets over long stretches of time. In the stock market, that might mean low-cost index funds, boring, diversified vehicles that quietly track the growth of whole economies. In real estate, that might mean owning a modest home and holding it through cycles of fear and euphoria. In business, that might mean building something small but scalable, an online service, a digital product, a specialized agency, and reinvesting profits instead of constantly upgrading your lifestyle. Technology gives you an extra layer of leverage they never had, the ability to scale your time. One piece of content, one software product, one online course, one ebook, one niche website can be created once and sold thousands of times. One clever system or automation can handle work while you sleep. This is why so many modern millionaires have boring online businesses you've never heard of. It's not as glamorous as winning the lottery or going viral, but it's much more repeatable. Yet the biggest enemy of the modern wealth builder isn't a lack of opportunity, it's impatience. The stories that go viral are the overnight wins, the trader who turned a small bet into millions, the crypto token that jumped 1,000%, the startup founder who sold his company at 25. You rarely hear about the quiet 15-year slog behind the most real success. The danger is simple. When you expect millionaire status in a year, you take risks that can wipe you out in a week. History rewards those who respect compounding, not those who try to outrun it. To move faster than past generations without crashing, you need a dual mindset, long-term in wealth, short-term in learning. Long-term in wealth means choosing strategies that can realistically work for 10, 20, 30 years. Consistent investing, avoiding destructive debt, owning assets that produce cash or grow with the economy. Short-term in learning means rapidly testing and improving your skills, your career moves, or your business ideas, adapting to new tools like AI, automation, and global platforms. You speed up by learning faster, not by gambling harder. The future will almost certainly create more millionaires than any period in history. And it will probably create more people who feel left behind. Artificial intelligence, robotics, climate transitions, demographic shifts, they'll destroy some jobs and create others. Those who cling to certainty and wait for the old days to come back will struggle. Those who treat themselves as a long-term asset, constantly upgrading their mind, their skills, and their network, will be positioned to capture the opportunities that emerge. In that sense, you are both the investor and the investment. When you strip away the myths, the story of ordinary millionaires is surprisingly consistent across time, culture, and technology. They weren't superheroes. They were people who made slightly better decisions than average and repeated them for an unusually long time. They earned, they saved, they owned, they waited. The numbers on their statements looked boring for years, then decades, until one day, they didn't. So when you picture your own future, don't just imagine the moment you become a millionaire. Imagine the thousands of small, unremarkable choices between now and then. What you learn after work instead of scrolling. What you do with the raise instead of inflating your lifestyle. Whether you own the tools you use or whether they own you. In a world moving at incredible speed, the slow, steady habits of wealth building are more counterintuitive and more powerful than ever. This is Hidden Finance, where we reveal the quiet patterns behind loud fortunes and show you how to use the past to rewrite your financial future. If this journey through time opened your eyes, stay with us, because the next episode might just change the way you see money forever. Because in the end, The real secret isn't that ordinary people became millionaires. It's that the path was never truly hidden. Most people just never learn how to see it.